on to the next step, which is the tail. So go ahead and open bag E, and then inside open E1. And I dropped all those parts into a tray as usual, and got the plastic parts on the side. So basically the first step is to build these idler pulleys. Pretty straightforward. You just go right into the idler on each side. Make sure they're seated all the way down in the pulley. Okay, should basically be flush or just under the pulley. Alright, go ahead and do that. And then, now the manual doesn't state this, and I think it's optional, is to put the pin in. Now, the pin fits pretty tight in these inner races I'm seeing, as you see. It just doesn't slide around. So I don't think Loctite's necessary, but if you like, you can use a very light amount of green, or even blue for that matter, to secure this pin in between the bearings. But again, I don't think it's needed. So then once you get both of them built, basically is get that pin so it's centered on the pulley, and go ahead and snap them in to this tail case half. Alright, make sure the pin's seated on both sides. Make sure the pulley doesn't rub. You'll notice I have a little bit of flashing right there. That's pretty simple. Just take an X-Acto blade and clean that off. You don't want any plastic rubbing that pulley. So as long as you're centered and square, that thing should spin free in both sides. So get both sides together and we'll continue on. Okay, next step is to get the case halves you built and 2 of these silver self-tapping screws. They're the only self-tappers in the tray. Okay, I'm not noticing that there's really a left or a right half here, but you'll notice, get your boom out, you'll notice there's a hole on each side. Okay, we do want the MSH to be upright on the heli, but at this point I don't think it's going to matter since these case halves are basically the same each side. So what you want to do is go ahead, and you'll notice inside the case there's a raise here, and that's going to go into the hole on the boom. So make sure that lines up and goes firmly in and on the hole. Okay, same thing on this one. Get them together. Okay, now these self-tappers, one goes in on one side and one goes in on the other. And the way you'll tell is if you look at the holes here, one hole is a slightly smaller diameter than the other hole, okay? So what you want to do is take the large hole diameter, and the way you can tell is it'll thread. And you're going to stick the screw in from the side with the large hole, okay? And you'll see it goes in the large hole, but if you look at the other side now, it has the small hole where the screw's going to tap in. Don't put them in backwards. If you screw this hole in on this side on the small hole, it's simply going to thread in there and it's not going to hold this tail case together. So you got to make sure you get the screw in the right hole. Alright, so again, it should go down in on one side and then start to tap into the plastic on the other side. Okay, so once you get one in, then for sure we know this is this side now has the small hole here, so we will flip it over, put the screw in the big hole, and again it should drop right in the hole on this side. If it threads in on this side, you've got it backwards, and then go ahead after it drops in that hole and thread it in and tighten it up. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, but it's important you get the screw in the proper hole on this case. If you don't, you get them reversed, you're really not holding anything together. Alright, so get those together, and that finishes that step, and we'll continue. Okay, next step on page 19 is to go ahead and put on the servo mounts for the tail servo. Now, I am going to make a deviation here to the manual. The manual showing that the tail servo is on this side of the heli, and of course the blades rotate this way. Myself, I don't like that. I've actually, when servos have been on this side, in a crash, the paddle or something can whack that servo and basically destroy it. I've had better luck with the servo mounted on the other side of the heli. Gives it an angle, the blade may deflect off the servo rather than striking it hard on. It's just the way I like to do it, so I'm going to put my servo on the other side. So what does that mean? Well, in the drawing it's showing the clamps, if this is the boom, MSH up will go into the heli this way. They wanted these on here like this, okay? As you see in the drawing now, they wanted it on this so the servo will mount right here. Well, as I said, am now going to flip that the other way as I'm going to put my servo on the other side of the heli. I hope later that doesn't affect my push rod, but I don't think it will. It shouldn't really matter which side it's on. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and put them on this way, and at this point go ahead and you're going to get out 2.5 by 12, Okay. And that's going to be these two in here. The larger, there's only two of these that are 12 millimeters long, and the larger. And go ahead and put them in here, but don't tighten them up. Leave them loose enough that these can rotate, because when we come to mount the servo, we're going to need to move that around. All right, so get them in there, get them started, and we'll tighten that up later. Okay, next step is to go ahead and mount the servo onto the holder. Now again, remember, I flipped mine the other way, so I'm on the other side. No biggie, but go ahead and they give you another set of these, and for Futaba I'm using a 9257. I just use two of these on this row. Alright, so you can set those aside. There, you can have a bunch of extra of those because this is the last servo to mount. Anyway, of note here is go ahead and put those servo brackets on the back side of the servo, not the front, because the servo will basically mount with the output shaft pointing toward the bottom of the heli. Additionally, note the output shaft orientation. In the manual, it's showing the output shaft toward the main gear. Okay, so we're going to put this servo on there. Then you'll move these until they line up with the holes, and go ahead and take 4 of your small screws and go ahead and secure that onto the bracket. Let's go ahead and do that and continue on. By the way, you'll notice in these brackets that there's 4 holes for different kinds of servos. For the 9257, what you want to do is line up one hole with the bottom hole, and then that'll line up the second hole with this one that's right on this step. I noticed if I move in and try and mount the servo to this hole here, it doesn't quite line up with this hole that is in the middle of the step. Okay, so we're going to do here and here. Alright, so just a tip there. Okay, the next step of the manual is to have you put on the servo ball and that kind of thing. However, I'm not going to do that yet, and the reason being is we got to get our servo hooked up to the gyro, powered up, and we got to find our arm that gives us best 90. Okay, when the rudder stick center. I will show that later. Okay, when we do tail setup and everything, and I get this hooked up to the gyro. So just a tip for you Futaba guys, they want 13.5 millimeter for the ball distance per the manual. Okay, if you're using a Futaba servo, it's pretty straightforward. This 6-star arm, the farthest out hole is 13.5. If you don't have that, this 4-star arm, the second to the last hole out, is 13.5. This arm is probably better because it'll give you more choices of arms to find 90 with. Okay, so anyway, set that aside. We will come back to that and do that when I do a final tail setup. Okay, in order to continue on with the build and build the rest of the tail, we do need to mount this in the heli. Normally I wouldn't do that and build it straight up here, but we do need to get it in the heli because we need the belt through to build the tail around here. Remember, on this heli, the belt is captured around the main gear, so you have to pull the main shaft if you were to pull the boom and leave the belt in the system. Okay, so we do have to mount this. And I may, when I come back, do the reverse, so for video purposes, but for now we're going to go ahead and do the mounting. So at this point, it's a good idea to get your belt around your pulley, your main drive gear, and make sure there's no twists or kinks or anything in it at this time. Then what I like to do is put a twisty tie around my belt, and that will help me feed it down the boom. So get your belt prepped so it's straight, no kinks, that kind of thing. Alright, the next thing we want to make sure is that this hole is on the left side of the heli. So again, when this goes into the heli, make sure the MSH heli wording is right side up, and that will put your hole on the left side. So pretty straightforward at this point. Feed your belt in. Try not to get any extra twists that we have to work out taken later. You may not be able to help it. Okay, and get your belt fed down the system. Okay, bear with here. And try and keep everything without a twist in it. We want those pulleys to line up. Of course, we'll be adjusting all that tension later. Okay, and then you're going to feed it in. Now, the holes in the block are slotted. Okay, so when we put our bolts in, this is how we do our belt adjustment, by sliding this in and out. Well, we can't do belt adjustment right now because we don't have the motor and pinion in. So we're going to go ahead, put the bolts into this and the nuts, all 4, in these locations, but don't tighten them up yet. Tighten them up enough so you can still slide this in and out. So when we do belt tension later after mounting the motor, then we'll go ahead and tighten them up at that time. Alright, so get this on the heli, and we'll come back and continue on with the building of the end of the tail. Again, I'm probably going to go ahead and pull my main shaft and get my belt out of the frame so that I can show building the tail more easily in video. So when you come back and see that, don't worry that I've got it out of the heli again. All right?